Sorry about the view there. We're going to go and do a take two. Aloha and welcome to Island Alert, the show where we talk to Kauaʻi's first responders. I'm Max Richardson. Joining me today is a pillar of our criminal justice system in more ways than you might realize. Please welcome Kauaʻi County Prosecuting Attorney, Rebecca Like. Madam Prosecutor, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Hōʻike on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Stay informed, stay inspired, and stay up to date with all your hyper-local Kauaʻi stories. And if you are watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment. We read every single one.
The following program is a production of Hōʻike Kauaʻi Community Media. Island Alert was made possible in part by the Kauaʻi Island Utility Cooperative.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. I know it's been between some renovations we're having done to the station and your extremely busy schedule. It's been a scheduling difficulty, but we finally got here. So I'm very excited about this. So thanks for coming in. I actually got you a little gift too.
Oh, thank you. Awesome.
And I didn't plan this, but it kind of matches your suit.
It does, my motif. Thank you.
Now, I always like to start with a little getting to know you. So why don't you tell us about yourself? Where are you from? What made you want to be a lawyer? And can you kind of take us on the journey from like grade school to law school to now you're a county prosecutor?
Sure. And thanks again for having me. I was born and raised in Springfield, Illinois. So kind of from a family of farmers. And from a young age, I was always interested in justice. And I remember in high school, I would write letters for the ACLU or write letters to different organizations that weren't treating their workers fairly. And I always had this sense that advocating for folks who couldn't advocate for themselves or giving a voice to the voiceless. So I ended up going to college in Portland, Oregon. And then I decided after graduating that I wanted to go to law school. It was sort of serendipitous that I ended up in Hawaii. My mother moved to Maui shortly after I graduated high school. So I followed her. And I clerked for a judge on Maui who was a former prosecutor. I never really considered being a prosecutor. It's sort of, it just wasn't something that I saw in my future. I thought that I would be more of a policy person or involved in government at some other level. But he really encouraged me to take the position on Kauaʻi when it became available, and that was in 2009. And shortly after I moved to Kauai, I met my future husband, and the rest is history. So I've been here since then at the prosecutor's office.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. That's so cool. That and it's great to hear someone who says, "I really wanted to give a voice to the voiceless," and then I feel like a lot of people would then take that desire, and if they wanted to be a lawyer, they'd go into something like you said, like policy, contract law, or like a public defender or something like that. I think it's really valuable that you took that desire and went to work for the prosecutor's office and became the prosecutor because, now we have a compassionate office of the prosecuting attorney that wants to give a voice to the voiceless instead of wanting to get convictions. I think that's really valuable. And that's a big part of why I wanted to have you on the show was I was like, this person's not just like your normal, like stereotypical, cutthroat prosecuting attorney. Like this person cares about justice, not just the law, And
I'm fortunate to be on Kauaʻi where it's just a very unique island, I think, even in comparison to the other counties throughout the state. Since we're so small, I feel like folks are more invested in successful outcomes. Like they just don't want to throw the book at people because the people they're throwing the book at are their aunties or uncles or cousins. I mean, there's certainly a place for people to be punished and they should be held accountable for the harm that they cause in the community. But I think that there's more political will for trying to help people heal and get on the right track, as opposed to just locking them up and throwing away the key.
Yeah, and I love that. I think it's sort of a common sense approach to justice, that I think is sorely needed. So that segues into the next question. What's your philosophy when it comes to justice and the law? Like your personal views?
My personal philosophy, I feel like it's evolving. It's constantly evolving and influenced by things I see on a daily basis. But my main thought is that there's not a one size fits all approach for people, and I think that my philosophy has evolved just in seeing the generations of folks come through the prosecutor's office. We prosecute grandparents, parents, and then the grandchildren. And so something is failing system-wide if it's this multi-generational system. It's hard sometimes to know what the best outcome is for folks. People are complex. We're complex individuals. One thing I've heard is that hurt people, and I think that that's true as well. Not that that excuses the behavior, but it's just a factor to consider, especially when diverting resources towards early intervention for children or for youth, to make sure that kids who've experienced some sort of trauma in their lives have an outlet for that or have some sort of pro-social options. So it's a complex philosophy. It's just, there's no one size fits all. There's no easy approach to solving the crime and drug problem.
No, I totally agree, and I think most sensible people do, right? It seems like locking someone in a cage just to keep them from being a danger to the rest of society should kind of be the last resort option. But it's also the first one that comes to mind, so then it becomes a very complex issue of like, well, what do we do if we want to avoid that? And I think, spoilers for later in the interview, but I think you have a lot of potential answers to that question. Was there like a particular experience, either in your personal life or in your career, that has had a substantial effect on shaping your approach to criminal justice?
When I was in college, I struggled with drug addiction, and I ended up going to a rehabilitation program. And prior to going to drug treatment, I had some interactions with law enforcement, and they were always positive. And after I went to treatment, I kind of came to the understanding that my experience as a white woman interacting with the criminal justice system was different than other folks' interaction with the system. So that really shaped my experience, and it was a very humbling experience. I came from, I was only child, and I think it really shocked my parents that I went down that path. So it was a very humbling experience, and made me realize that, stay humble, because you can fall as well, or you can make mistakes, and to treat people that way as well, is to realize that, the worst action in a person's life does not defend who they are as a human being.
Well, that's very profound, and thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I know I've people in my life have struggled with addiction a lot too, so I know what that's like, and I'm happy to see that your recovery has gone well, because you seem pretty successful now. So, but yeah, that's it's an insidious beast, and it can get anybody.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think if I went up to any random layperson on the street and I asked them, what does the prosecutor do? They would probably say they put bad guys in jail, or they represent the state in court. And that is part of what you do. You do put bad guys in jail, but you and your office in particular leads quite a few programs that are more geared towards keeping people out of jail rather than putting them there, like addiction resources, or teen court. I know I've known a few parents who have had to bring their kids to teen court. So tell me about some of those.
There's a lot of responsibilities as the prosecutor. So first and foremost, I manage an office of about 45 people. And we have about 15 deputies. So different deputy prosecutors who are assigned to different courts. That takes up a lot of time, as does working with the police department every day. We're helping guide them, whether they're calling us when they're on scene, and we're trying to tell them what charges to arrest somebody on, or how to deal with something, or we're following up with an officer to get more information on a case we're working. But yeah, I've been very fortunate to apply for some grants that have allowed our office to expand what we do. So one of those is we started a reentry program through our Life's Choices program with a $1 million grant from the Bureau of Justice Administration. So part of the goal of that is that when people get released from custody, that they're kind of set on the right path, that they're not just kind of released from the jail and they can hitchhike down to Lihue to get what they need. Our hope is that, at least we can...
Here's a bag with your stuff in it, and
right.
Good luck.
Right, exactly. And we're also very fortunate that the county allowed us to disperse those funds, grant and aid funds for mental health and substance use. So that's another thing our office does. Unfortunately, I don't get to do that as much on a day-to-day basis as I would like, but I think it makes a big difference. It's hard to measure results sometimes when you focus a lot of efforts upstream, but I think the investment is worthwhile.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, yeah, it's the goal is to make crime go down. And so the best way to do that is to stop it from being committed in the first place. And so I think that's great to see the prosecuting attorney's office putting those resources into things like trying to ensure better outcomes before somebody's got to go to jail, and after, like the reentry program. I think that's great, because it is like, what are you supposed to do when you get out of jail and they're just like, all right, see ya. Right. So I'm sure this will be a tough question to answer because you'll just have so many different possible answers to go through. But tell me about a time in your career when you've had to make like a really difficult legal decision.
It happens a lot. Cases are complex, and there's a lot of different interests that we have to balance to secure public safety, to make sure that our victims get a sense of justice. And it's everyday cases. I hesitate to say the word haunt, but they do. Think about how they impact families, and sometimes it's hard to know who's going to be successful and who's not going to be successful. I think one of the critical things for success, though, is family support or connections in the community. So when we can kind of buttress those, we try to, but it's heartbreaking when you see somebody, for example, like graduate from drug court and then you see their name on the arrest log, or I'll handle a case and in the hopes that, I'm going to handle this case and maybe we can get a better outcome for this individual. But oftentimes folks die, like that we've charged, and we're hoping, if we can just get them maybe involved in the system, then they'll have a better outcome. But a lot of the folks that we prosecute are houseless, or they don't have access to resources, or they can't go to their doctor's appointment because they don't have anybody to watch their dog, or there's just a lot of things that happen that are really tragic and sad. So
yeah, it seems like not the most emotionally easy line of work. So on the other hand, though, on maybe a little lighter note, tell me about a big win for you. Like maybe it was a time when you were able to keep someone out of jail when what they really needed was help. Or maybe it was a time when there was somebody that was a really big danger to society and you were able to put them away for a long time. Something like that.
One thing that keeps me in the job, and one thing I try to focus on too with the folks who work in my office, is that what we do makes a difference in the community, right? And sometimes we don't always see the success stories. So like I just previously mentioned, I really enjoy drug court graduation. We haven't had huge classes in drug court, but it's really a moving experience, and also because a lot of the alums from past classes will be there to support the graduates. And you just see a lot of these folks have had a lot of run-ins, have not had the easiest go of it. Some of them have spent a lot of time behind bars. And so for them to take accountability, to do the hard work, and to get their life together is really impactful and meaningful. We have some dangerous people, and there's certain people who need to be behind bars on the other side of your question. And um, I, I I hesitate to say that we would celebrate that win, but I have 3 children in this community, and I sleep easier knowing that certain people are off the streets and not able to victimize people. So you hope that people can get their act together, but there's certain people, especially people who prey on the vulnerable, that need to be separated from society and incarcerated. So there's been a lot of folks throughout my career that's been the case. It's not ideal, but it's really the only option that we have.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's a shame that it has to happen, but being that it does have to happen, good that it happened. So you work for the Office of the Prosecuting Attorney, and you are the prosecuting attorney. So yours is mainly a leadership role. You just said you have like 45 people in your office. You lead a whole office of our county government. How often do you actually get in the courtroom and prosecute cases yourself?
Not as often as I did as a deputy, for sure. I have a handful of cases assigned to me. One thing that's nice about the size of Kauaʻi is that I get to see every person who gets arrested. I get to see the jail log every week. So I'm familiar with what's going on. And sometimes there'll be a case that I think, oh, I should handle this case, or a case that might be kind of especially messy or unpleasant. And so I'll try and handle those. I try to go to court on occasion. I go probably a couple times a month. I'll cover a calendar or do something like that, but it's not as often as it used to be.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, it's once you get the more administrative responsibilities you get, the less less time you have to tend to technical responsibilities. All right, so I know that for a lot of businesses and especially government agencies, pretty much every department head I've had on the show, staffing is like the biggest issue. And I think that's especially true when it comes to highly specialized professionals, like, say, someone who had to go through a graduate program just to have the opportunity to get licensed in their job. Is that true in your office? How are you doing personnel-wise? Are you short-staffed? Are you critically short-staffed?
It's always a struggle to fill all our deputy positions. So we on average have about 2 vacancies, it seems like. So if we're fully staffed, we'd have 17 attorneys in our office. It's understandable. It's an issue throughout the whole country. Prosecutors deal with a lot of burnout in our job, just because we really see people at their worst. And I think a similar issue. I'm not a first responder like police or fire, but I bear witness to the trauma that they see on a daily basis, especially folks who are from Kauaʻi. I think it's a little bit easier to be a little bit more disconnected because a lot of our officers are born and raised here, and the people that they're like responding to calls for are classmates or
people they went to kindergarten with.
Right, exactly. Or they're responding to some sort of tragedy like a suicide or a death in the family, and it's just unimaginable, even if you don't know the person. But if you knew the person or know their family, it's a lot to bear.
Much worse.
Yeah.
That's hard to compartmentalize.
So I think that adds to the retention and recruitment issues for first responders or people in law enforcement. But I think overall we're doing okay. We're kind of on par with the rest of the state in regards to our vacancies. Like I said, we hover around 2 deputy vacancies, but we get a lot of applicants. It's, one thing that's challenging or that I've learned in my time at the prosecutor's office is that it's critical that people have cultural competency if they're going to come here. Attorneys by their nature just think they're really darn smart. So it can be challenging for them to understand that in Hawaii, the first question isn't like what you do, it's like who you know or how you're connected to the community. So, I mean, I had a deputy in the past who's like asking our staff to make them coffee, or people who are just rude or disrespectful. It's just not going to be a good fit.
It's not going to work here.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I've learned. It's just critical that they have that cultural competency and humility.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. It's glad to hear that you guys aren't totally drowning in vacancies, at least. But I mean, 2 vacancies, that seems I mean, I don't know. I've never been a lawyer, but that seems at least somewhat manageable compared to some of the other departments. They're like, we have nobody, you know. So I think a lot of people, especially if all you know about the legal system is from movies and TV, I think a lot of people think of a lawyer's job as mostly taking place in a courtroom or in their office. But I know that you guys respond to calls and stuff, or respond to cases with the first responders sometimes. I know you guys, some of the OPA folks like carry badges, and that's a kind of a cool thing that I actually didn't know about until I befriended one of your deputy prosecutors, and we were just chatting, and he was like, yeah, I like actually go to scenes. It's not just the courtroom. And I thought that was really neat. So can you maybe tell me a little bit about that? Like, what does a prosecuting attorney or a deputy prosecuting attorney need to be at those scenes for? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you looking for when you're going there?
We don't visit scenes that often, but it does happen on occasion. Oftentimes, especially when we're preparing for trial, we'll visit a scene after the fact, and there's just no substitute for seeing it in living color. It's not to be gruesome or gory, but it's, the sooner you respond to the scene, the more quickly you can make observations, or you can help guide the detectives in what questions to ask, or looking here, or you can just work more hand in hand with what the next steps are going to be, whether or not we're going to need a search warrant here, whether or not we should interview this person, or just kind of triaging the situation as it evolves, especially in serious offenses.
So it's, I guess, to paraphrase, it's sort of being able to lend your knowledge of the law from a courtroom perspective to help the police make decisions from the enforcement perspective, because they have knowledge of the law, but not necessarily once it goes beyond like charging the case.
Absolutely. I mean, they do make a lot of the investigative decisions, but we're always happy to be involved early on so that we can just work together to make sure that we're, crossing our T's and dotting our I's in investigations. So,
well, that's cool. I'm always happy to see interdepartmental cooperation, because in bigger governments, you don't get as much of that, and it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that the police are in the same building as us. The courthouse is right across the street. It makes it easy enough to just kind of walk across the hall and talk story about what's going on. So
yeah, it's very convenient. It's very convenient if you're being charged with something too. It's all one-stop shop, Okay, and plus, I just wanted to ask about that because it sounds cool. Like, I don't know, like Miami Vice or something, All right, so criminal trials are a matter of public record, right? So can somebody off the street that wants to learn more about our judicial system, can they just walk into the courthouse and have a seat in the gallery?
Absolutely. The courtrooms are open to the public. It's interesting to observe. It would probably be good to just like make sure that there's something going on that day before you just kind of show up. But there's a lot of interesting things that take place that the public doesn't really get to see unless you come in person. There's been a little bit of a proliferation, I think, on the continent with more hearings being streamed live on YouTube or things like that, which I think is great because it just gives more access to justice, right? For folks who have to work or may not be able to just like show up on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. and watch court.
Right.
But certainly anybody is welcome to come and observe.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that court and the justice system in general is accessible. It is public. And so I think the whole legal system is kind of opaque to someone that has never been forced to have involvement in it, because people don't realize that, in fact, they can learn more about it. So I think a lot of people, myself included in a lot of ways, just really don't know much about what happens aside from, we know what getting arrested looks like. We know what getting sentenced looks like. Everything in between there is kind of, so.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's complex. It's not a simple procedure. And I think that the law can be intimidating and scary. And the thought of, oh, I'm just going to go to court and watch seems like, that doesn't seem accessible to some folks. But anybody's welcome to come and check it out. And yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and court is one of the best places I feel like to learn about the law, because the lawyers are phrasing it for jurors to understand. So it's in plain English that a layperson like me who didn't go to college can understand. Whereas if you like try to read a brief or something and it's for lawyers to understand, you're like, what does this say?
Even we don't always understand the legal implications. It takes some analysis sometimes. So
yeah, I was just I'm working on getting a little farm plot and it's sublicensed, and the language in the rental, it's like sublicensor agrees to sublicense plot to sublicensee for the purpose of sublicense, and I'm like, oh my god, I lost track of what I'm even reading about. All right.
And one thing I get a lot too is like folks assume that because I'm an attorney that I understand the intricacies of all laws, right? So it's like, oh, what about this or what about that? It's like my knowledge is pretty limited to this criminal practice, and I don't know about leases or landlord-tenant as much, or it's complex, and there's a lot of areas of the law.
As it turns out, in the United States, there are a lot of laws. So, and that's a nice segue. If you ever retire from being a lawyer, being a TV show host might work out for you. There's a nice segue into the next question, which is that I know a lot of communities, especially rural communities like ours, have these like kooky old laws on the books, like no person shall walk a duck on a Sunday unless it's raining, or like something like that. And I'm wondering what's Kauaʻi's silliest law that's still on the books for whatever reason.
I don't really know. I'm sure there's probably something buried in the county code or something, but the reality is that we just don't have the resources to be enforcing a goofy law. And if it ever came up, it would probably be taken off the books. But sometimes you just kind of, even in the revised statutes in the state law, sometimes there's just things in there and you're like, oh, this is worded so poorly. That's what comes across a lot, is like, just who picked the verbiage for this? This is so confusing. So we spend a lot of time, every decade they have a penal review committee, and there's people throughout the state government, prosecutors, defense attorneys, police, and they all work together to kind of go through all the statutes and say, hey, like, does this need to be changed? What could we do better here? And we just finished that, kind of wrapping up that process. So,
well, that's good that happens.
Yeah, so we're trying to make sure that we're not wasting enforcement efforts on dumb laws, right? Yeah.
And I think, at least, I mean, I don't know. I've never lived in a place that has laws like that, but you always read about them online or see them on TV or whatever. I don't think anybody really is enforcing those laws. I don't think the cops are out there looking for people walking their ducks, But so it's just one of those things that, like, well, we've never bothered to have the legislature strike the law from the books, Right. But yeah, I guess if it was politically convenient and you really wanted to go after somebody, you could get them for walking their duck or something, But anyway, okay, so it's good to know that we don't have any glaring, like, silly, ridiculous laws.
Nothing that stands out in my mind. So, yeah.
So, okay, little personal story from me. I recently got Disney Plus. I'm a big superhero nerd. So I just got Disney Plus, and I've been catching up on all the Marvel shows I've missed. And I actually, before I even knew that I was going to have you on the show, I watched all of She-Hulk Attorney at Law. I'm wondering, have you seen that show? Did you like that show? And have you ever had to have that experience of representing a mutated supervillain who's at their parole hearing?
I have not seen it. I meant to check it out when you sent me that question. I was like, wow, that sounds really good. And it sounds like something I might be able to watch with my kids as well. I have not had that experience. We do like the Marvel shows in our house, but I will check it out and report back.
It's really funny, actually. Yeah. It's like a superhero legal comedy.
Yeah. We like lighthearted things at the house because, it's enough heavy stuff. At work.
I can imagine that. Yeah. So I think we would all like to think, ideally, that justice and law are aligned, right? That's the purpose of writing law, is to codify justice, right? And some people think that those two words are even synonymous, right? Law and justice. But it's not necessarily always the case, unfortunately. There are some situations where moral righteousness diverges from legal compliance. And in those situations, which do you personally believe is more important? And I'm not necessarily looking for the County of Kauai's like official stance. I'm more looking for what's Becky Like's personal opinion. And if you can't answer, that's okay.
It's a complex question. So, we have a lot of discretion in our office as to how we charge cases. So I think that's where that really comes to the forefront is that, okay, we have this law. It says you can charge something this way, but we can choose to charge it this way or that way. As an example, we have this law, it's called habitual property offender. So if an individual has like 2 or 3 trespassing convictions, they can be charged with a felony. So you can see on one side how that could be like a little bit maybe abusive. If somebody's charged with a petty misdemeanor offense, that's punishable by 30 days in jail. If they get 3 convictions for that in a 10-year period, they can get charged with a Class C felony, which is punishable by 5 years in prison. But it's also an opportunity to try to pursue a better outcome for somebody who just keeps getting system involved, right? So I guess the short answer to your question is, I mean, we use the laws as tools to do justice, and we try to do a good job at pursuing that. I mean, that is our goal, is to pursue justice in every case. And sometimes we fall short and sometimes we succeed, but, we do our best to try to search for those outcomes. There's certain cases, especially death cases, where there's just never going to be true justice for the survivors. There's no way that I can bring back the lost loved one, even if the person dies in prison, or even if they serve the rest of their life, and they're in there for the rest of their life. It's not going to undo the harm that was caused. It brings a little bit of peace of mind knowing that that person can't enjoy their life, but it's not true justice as I would see it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good answer to a difficult question. That's why I saved it for last. But I think it is a very important question to ask of the person who's in charge of prosecuting justice, for our county. It's like Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you again for having me.
It's great. And you're a good interviewee, so that helps. But I've been I cover the county council meetings pretty regularly, and I always find it interesting when OPA is applying for a grant or telling the county council about something they're doing that is all about helping people or finding positive outcomes other than just prosecuting criminals or convicting criminals. And I was really impressed by that, and I was like, one of these days I should have her on the show. And so I'm glad that we finally made it happen.
Absolutely. And it's evolving. We're constantly learning new things and trying to integrate those into our office. So, there's just so many cutting edge things. And I don't know, it's mind blowing to me how little we know and how much there is to learn, and especially with this boom in AI, there are certain things. One thing that that we just applied for a grant for is just transcription services for body-worn camera. So I think that folks don't realize how much time. It's so great to have all this digital evidence. We have a ton of digital evidence these days. Everybody's being recorded all the time. Not really, but it certainly seems that way. We have surveillance footage. We have body-worn from all the officers on scene. And watching all that body-worn takes a great deal of time. So we just applied for a grant that will allow us to transcribe. It transcribes all the body-worn so we can search by word. And that's a great use of AI that we can implement in our office. And then, watching all that body-worn is, it's kind of a secondary trauma. It's just like watching all this unfold multiple times and having to rewind and go back can just be a lot. And then, there's this annual training about saving lives in traffic. So, and the big thing this year was trauma response. They want to do blood transfusions prior to getting folks to the hospital, which is just kind of mind-blowing to me that this is where we are in saving lives, preventing deaths on the road. So one thing that they're really pushing is these stop the bleed courses. So like they're asking, do you know how to apply a tourniquet? Do you know how to apply pressure correctly? And I guess what it comes down to, and I think it's really like it resonates on Kauaʻi, is that we all need to work together, right? Especially because we have these rural places, Wainiha or Kekaha. It's going to take you a while to get to the hospital. Who's going to be the real first responder? How are we able to help each other? So, I'm grateful to just be, learning and doing what I can to try to serve the county the best that I can, to be on top of the latest evidence-based research and bring that home to our little island in the middle of the ocean. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're happy that we have you here. So thanks so much for being on the show. You're preaching to the choir about that. There being so much footage means there's so much time investment. We being at a TV station, we kind of get that same thing where there's like, if you have 3 cameras and each one rolled for half an hour, and you have 1 editor, then that's an hour and a half that you have to spend just watching the footage to see what you got before you can even do anything with it. And I can imagine, it's the same thing if you had 3 or 4 officers responding to something that each had a body cam and rolled it for a half hour, an hour.
Absolutely. And then they each one talk to different witnesses, or each one, right? It's
And then you, the prosecutor, has to watch all that, including the part where he's just walking, around to the back of the house or whatever.
Or they record the entire transport as well. So, everybody gets transported to our, the cell block in Lihue. So if they have to drive all the way from Kekaha, it's the whole
you get a nice
car ride.
hour
And
of
a lot
just
of
steering wheel.
No, a lot of times folks will say stuff in the back that's relevant.
So you have to watch it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a lot of
So that AI transcriptions, and we actually have we use AI to do transcripts of stuff that we shoot for exactly that purpose. So that way, like when our social media manager wants to cut out reels, she doesn't have to watch my whole 45-minute show. She can just go, find me a thing where Rebecca Like said this. And it's like, oh, here's a part. So awesome. All right. Well, I guess we should roll into the outro because I can't think of any other off-the-cuff stuff to say. Well, that's all I have. Thank you so much again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. That's our show. That's all we have for this month. So be sure to tune in next time where we'll have another one of Kauaʻi's professional heroes. Until then, stay safe out there. Aloha.